What's good, everyone? Welcome back to The Vibe. I'm Ethan, or EJ, and you are currently listening to the Visualize podcast. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. Visualize is all about seeing and understanding life through different lenses, and ultimately visualizing life in a better perspective. This is pretty much a place where we can vibe, share some cool stories, and to just have great life conversations. So welcome, everyone. I hope everyone is having a fantastic week so far. Basically, a couple days ago, I did a poll kind of just to get the Visualize listeners more engaged and more involved in this podcast. And I gave you guys 3 topics to choose from on what you all want to hear me talk about for this week's episode. And majority said that you guys want to hear me talk about cutting them off. And cutting them off, it kind of sounds pretty vague, and it's vague for a reason. We're going to get into that. But before we get into it, wherever you are listening right now, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, please follow this podcast. I saw this week's analytics. There have been more Spotify listeners than Apple Podcast listeners this week. Last week, it was Apple Podcasts. Y'all were dominating. Shoot, I don't know who's going to win by the end of the season, at the end of season 1. So we'll see. Definitely follow this podcast wherever you are listening. And also rate this podcast. And also follow at Visualize by EJ on TikTok and Instagram for more podcast updates and whatnot. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. One of the most cliche sayings, I'd say, that I've heard a lot in my life is the saying, not everyone's going to like you. I'm sure you heard it before. I know I've heard it many, many times, especially as someone who is a people pleaser. It really took me a long time to kind of realize that and understand that not everyone is going to like you. Not everyone's going to like you as a person, what you wear, how you present yourself, even how you do things. And even as a content creator, I kind of had to deal with for a time, kind of accepting that not everyone's going to like the stuff that you post, you know. Even up until now, I still get dislikes on my videos, and I still get those comments where it's like, bro, that's not cool. And that's okay. You know, not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone's going to like what you do. And really, when I hear that phrase, I'm kind of reminded of just strangers, people who don't necessarily know you on a personal level. Maybe it's someone you just met. Maybe it's just acquaintances. Just, you know, they don't necessarily know your life. Now, it's another thing to kind of realize not everyone's going to love you. That hits different on another level. Maybe that might be family. Maybe that might be friends, a partner. Not everyone's going to love the way you do, the way you love them. You know, for example, you've shown so much love and loyalty, and you've dedicated so much time to a person, but that wasn't reciprocated. Or maybe a family member or a best friend that you trusted at one point betrayed you or backstabbed you, you know. Or maybe ultimately both you and a person, this may be a family member or a friend or someone you trusted, through time kind of grown and changed a lot. You kind of decided mutually that it would be best to distance you guys from each other and to just love each other from afar. I kind of wanted to introduce these phrases to you all to start this conversation of cutting them off by making a point that I'm sure everyone knows, that in life, in the grand scheme of life, in a person's life, people come and people go. Not everyone's going to be in each and every season of your life, and neither are you going to be in theirs, you know. Whether if you decided to cut off people or to remove them from your life or to distance yourself from them, or if God physically removed people from your life, you know. Although it can be sad, although it can kind of get dark at times. You might miss the person, you might miss the memories, you might even miss the thought of that person. Depending on the circumstance, in a way, for some people it could be freeing. For some, it can be healing. For others, it can help them realign themselves with God. It really just depends on the person and kind of the circumstance or the situation even. When I was planning this episode, my dad had told me something that kind of struck me and kind of gave me a different perspective. My dad told me, for some people, cutting off others, cutting off people, can be as easy as turning on a water faucet, or turning on a light switch. But for some, it can be as hard as pulling teeth out of one's mouth and having to deal with that pain afterward. I recently had a fallout with somebody that I trusted, that I known for a while, causing me to sort of distance myself and eventually kind of cut them out of my life. And that really kind of served as inspiration for this video, or this episode rather. It also kind of reminds me of like elementary school and middle school. You know how you make those friends back in the day, like in elementary and middle school. I remembered I used to have like these really cool friend groups, back then. At one point I used to call them my squad. At one point I used to call them in my gang, whatever. But like, I remembered in elementary school or middle school, these friends, we can sometimes have those conversations of, guys, like when we go into high school, when we go into college, or when we get married, I want you to like be my groomsmen or my bridesmaids, or like, or I want all of us to keep in touch, and I want us to be like the most closest, bestest friends in life. I don't want to like lose you guys. And then as time passes, like maybe you just graduated high school, maybe you just graduated college, or you're about to step into a very serious, relationship with someone. And maybe you might encounter a photo of you guys just, somewhere. And you kind of realize like, man, I haven't talked to those people in years. I hope they're doing okay. Moral of the story, not everyone is going to be in your life. People come and people go. People enter your life. They may have a positive or a negative effect on it, and they dip. People change. People develop. People do stupid stuff. People can help you heal. People can be imperfect, And so kind of getting into cutting people off. So the way I would kind of define cutting someone off or cutting people off is making the decision and acting upon terminating a relationship or a friendship with someone, cutting communication with them, and expecting not to ever have to interact with them again. And this can mean like blocking someone off of social media, or physically letting go of that person and moving away from them. Really, a couple people who have helped me in shaping this podcast and kind of the message I want to put out was my friends and my family, really just my close circle. But especially my parents. My dad and my mom knows this topic very well. But my dad, he also brought up another good point of when cutting off people, it really comes down to thinking about what is best for you as an individual. However, like cutting off people doesn't always have to be the move to take all the time. He also mentioned to not make a permanent solution for temporary problems. There's definitely a difference between like cutting off someone and distancing yourself from them. I feel like cutting off someone, you don't necessarily expect to talk to them or to interact with them or to be with them in the future, whereas distancing yourself, you're giving them some room, but in a way you're kind of leaving some sense of hope that maybe in the future we might be able to reconnect. In terms of distancing myself, a lot of my experience, I call it loving people from afar. But a lot of my experiences with distancing myself from others have been with family. And I'm not talking about like my immediate family, like my parents or my siblings. We stay loyal. But it really, for me, it was the surrounding family. And, you know, I don't mean to put anyone on blast on this podcast. I don't mean to badmouth them. But in many parts of my life, I've seen how even your own blood can turn against you. Even family members can behave in such toxic ways and can manipulate and lie and betray you. It can even sometimes affect you mentally or physically or even spiritually, you know. And maybe you listening to this may relate to this, that, you know, there are people maybe in your life that aren't as good to you, you know. And if you're in that position, I genuinely pray that you may find healing, and that you also may find a way out, really. But sometimes you gotta kind of have to make that move of deciding, you know what, should I distance myself or should I completely cut off these people from my life? Should I establish boundaries? You know, everyone's case and circumstances are different. I don't want to jump on the podcast and be like, oh, you should do this, you should do that, without actually hearing the ins and outs of your situation. But really what I've learned about cutting people off or even distancing myself is that it takes a lot of self-reflection, you know, kind of thinking and reflecting on what's best for me, what's best for my well-being, what's best for my safety, what's best for my relationship with God. You know, for some people it might take a lot of time to sort of reflect and to think before making that big decision of, okay, I think I gotta call it quits. You know, maybe for some it might take, you know, some prayer and some surrenderance to God, to Jesus. And also sometimes it can be so hard. I want to emphasize on that. It can be so difficult. As I mentioned before, I'm very much a people pleaser. I don't know. I've always been like that, even when I was a kid. And at one point in my life, I stood up to a family member, and I kind of made it as though that was kind of like my last time talking to that person. And I'm someone who doesn't like confrontation. I don't like hurting people's feelings. But I remembered, you know, I said, what you did was wrong, and what you did hurt me, and I don't appreciate that. And you know, I've forgiven you. I only wish blessings upon blessings and love on you. But it's never going to be the same again. You know, and it takes a lot of nerve. I'm not going to lie. It takes a lot of courage to do that, to kind of tell someone, hey, like, you hurt me, or hey, what you're doing is wrong. I don't approve of that. Now, I don't think I said this, but this episode, I really want to incorporate kind of like my faith and my beliefs into this conversation, because I've learned so much from God about, not just about letting go of certain people or distancing myself from people, but also healing, self-healing. Because sometimes that process of just letting go of someone, it can be hard, and it could really like humble you at times. But you know, at the end of the day, like, to you who is listening, Christian or non-Christian, I genuinely believe that there's a creator out there who knows the ins and outs of everything. Who knows if homie is talking smack about you behind your back? Who knows if a business partner or your partner in a relationship has different intentions than what you think? Intentions that may cause harm to you or to the people you love or to your safety. He knows maybe why your friend or family member switched up on you just like that. He sees what goes on behind closed doors. And so it's so important to really like trust in him. And especially in those times where we have to make that decision of like, should I or should I not? Should I distance myself from them? Or, Lord, like what should I do? I also want to get into emotions. Just like the topic of emotions, because cutting people off, it's a given that cutting someone off can cause a lot of like emotions to arise. One of them may be fear. From my experience, I've in the past used to be scared and worried about having those like tough conversations with someone, if necessary, about like distancing myself from them. I used to even be scared of like just kind of ghosting them and kind of just cutting them off, number one, because of like FOMO, or the fear of missing out. What if I like cut off this family member? I won't be invited to them family reunions anymore. Or, what if I cut off this friend? Like, I'm not going to have friends anymore. Or, just thoughts like that. Or even just thoughts of what they might think of me, what they might say to other people about me. Let me tell you, don't be scared. You have nothing to be afraid of. At the end of the day, if the person has a negative influence on you and is taking a toll on your mental and physical and spiritual well-being, you reflect. You should reflect and think about if maybe distancing yourself from them or establishing boundaries or even cutting them off is the ideal solution. Another emotion that I think a lot of us can encounter when, cutting off someone is like sadness. Depending on the situation, maybe someone kind of did you wrong. Maybe you're disappointed because of the way someone just switched up on you. Or maybe after you cut someone off, after you distance yourself from them, you feel sad because you miss the person, you miss the memories, you miss who you thought they were. When I had a fallout with the person that I had trusted, I definitely felt a lot of emotions, mostly like sadness and disappointment of, dang, like how could you? But also like, man, why didn't I know? But also you kind of miss the person of like, man, I thought you were different. I thought, like, what about our memories and stuff like that? It's real. And I want to encourage you that like, if you're in that position of like feeling emotions, don't try to dismiss them, try to understand like why you may be feeling this way, I also had experiences of letting go friends and letting go people that I've loved. One thing that I've learned from that is people change. That's definitely a given. As time passes, people go through different experiences, and all in all, like, people go through character development. I've seen as well how, friends can sometimes use you. There was this one time where I had a friend who kind of like used me to get back at their ex or something like that. This was back in high school. And at the time I kind of knew what was going on, but I let it be, because like, oh, like, they're my friend, like, they're my homie, it's fine, like, you got to do what you got to do. But it's like, not you using me and then kind of discarding me when your ex is gone, I guess. really what I'm trying to say is ain't nobody got time for that. If like your friend or a partner or anyone is treating you less than what you're actually worth, like, don't just keep holding on because y'all are friends or because y'all know each other. Like, deuces. No. Like, sometimes I felt like I had a pact with my friend, like I can excuse their kind of negative behavior on me because, we're homies. Oh, they're just joking around, even though that joke kind of hurt me, like, it's difficult. It's hard to sometimes go through that process of realizing I don't think these people are good for me in my life, but don't be afraid. Really, don't be afraid. And even with like relationships as well, I cannot go without talking about like exes, because every time I hear like cutting them off, I don't know, sometimes I tend to hear a lot about like exes of like, oh, should I cut my ex off as well, or should we rekindle something? I don't know. I'm gonna just tell you this. But everyone's situation is different. I don't want to like say you should cut them off. Like, maybe you and your ex had a good ending. Maybe you guys are still friends, or maybe not. But regardless, when that question comes up of, should I cut off my ex or should I like reconnect with them? Be careful with that. Be careful with that, because depending on the situation. But if you loved them one time, if you loved them once, you got to be careful with loving them again or loving them a second time, because maybe you might not be actually in love with them, but you might be in love with the memories, with the person you thought they were, or even you might be in love with the thought of being in a relationship. So yeah, just some food for thought. Something to think about. But to kind of like wrap up talking about cutting off people or distancing yourself from people, I want to say something. Pray for them. Pray for everyone, obviously, but pray for whoever you are kind of distancing yourself from. Man, like, not only does it do a lot to the person you're praying for, but it also does a lot for yourself. Who may be healing, it definitely requires a lot of maturity and humility. But the way I like to think of it, kind of praying for them is like, I'm kind of like saying as well, I'm not who they say I am. I'm not how they treated me. Something about me is that I actually did martial arts for a very long time. I was involved in Taekwondo. It's the Korean martial art. And I'm actually a black belt, a 3rd degree black belt. Not everyone knows that about me. Man, back then, even though I was a people pleaser, if you did me wrong, like straight up, if you kind of like became my op, I would want to get violent. I would want to start a riot. No, like straight up, I would imagine back then, like fights. I would rehearse fights. If someone got on my nerves or something like that, I would want to cause so much drama, and I would want to like get revenge, and like, no one was safe with the Ethan Gonzales back then. But I've definitely realized how like talking about revenge or getting back at someone, let me tell you, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I've been there. I've wanted to get revenge on people. I've gotten revenge on some people. And it's only just going to cause you to want more and more and more. And it brings up the question of, when is it going to end? Like, when am I going to be satisfied in kind of getting back at them for what they did? And it's just, at least for me, it's just not fulfilling, Praying for them. I actually learned this a couple of years ago when a family member did something kind of screwed up to me. I, at the time, kind of decided, maybe let me just be the bigger person in this situation. And like I said, it takes a lot of like, kind of maturity and humility to say, you know what, even though these people caused me a lot of pain, I wish nothing but good things on them. I pray, Jesus, that you may bless them. When I pray for them, I'm kind of not bringing it into the future with me. I'm kind of just letting go of it, you know. I wish them a good life. All right, let's keep moving forward, you know. But I will say, kind of just to answer why I address this topic as cutting them off, is not only can you cut off people, but you can cut off things from your life that don't do you good. So, but to conclude this podcast episode, really, I want to leave you guys with three. Keep your head on a swivel. Be careful on who you trust in your close circle of friends, of family, or just, you know, in general, your close circle, the people you are with. And also be careful on what you say, because I've seen really how people can twist your words. They can get your words and twist them. Number 2, reflect on, you know, your situation before you make that big decision of cutting them off or distancing yourself, or even making boundaries. Like, make sure to not be quick on making those big decisions, but, you know, reflect on it, and take your time if you have to. And number 3, and the most important, I think, is lean on him. Lean on Jesus. We are all imperfect. All humans, we're all imperfect. And when we rely on each other, I feel like it can be unstable. It can be shaky, you know? But Jesus, he remains loyal. Period. You know, if you mess up, he got you. When you make a mistake, you know, he can help you fix it. He's willing to. When you miss them, come to him and he'll give you the love and the spiritual sugar that nothing in this world could ever give, you know? And I just say that with love, man. If you're non-Christian, definitely think on that. Just some food for thought. But that concludes today's episode of Visualize. I hope you all enjoyed it. Again, be sure to follow this podcast wherever you are listening, and make sure to rate and also follow the socials. I want to leave off with saying you are special, you are loved, and you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Be sure to remember that always. God bless. Thank you all so much for vibing with me. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.